My name is Theodore Lowell. Everyone calls me Ted. And at 79, I thought I'd already buried the worst pain a man can carry. Then one Tuesday morning, I walked into the bank to withdraw $400 for my heart medicine, and the teller looked up, leaned across the counter and whispered, "Sir, you should sit down." The account that was supposed to hold over $200,000, my pension, the money from selling our old farmhouse, was nearly empty, and the only other person allowed to touch it was one of my own daughters. Before I take you back to that morning, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to that Tuesday in March, the morning everything I believed about my family fell apart. That morning started like every other one had since my wife passed. I was up before the sun, the house too quiet, my coffee too strong. My daughter Tess came by at 7, the way she did every single day. She let herself in the back, set a bag of groceries on the counter, and started sorting my pills into the little plastic organizer with the days of the week printed on top. "Morning, Dad," she said. "You take the blue one yet?" "Waiting on you to nag me," she smiled. 52 years old, and she still had her mother's smile. For 6 years, ever since the stroke scared us all, Tess had been my hands and my feet. She drove me to the cardiologist. She fixed the gutters. She cut my toenails when I couldn't reach, and never once made me feel small about it. She lived 20 minutes away and worked part-time at the bakery, and somehow she was always here. My other daughter, Diane, lived 2 hours off in the city. She was the one with the title, the corner office, the husband who golfed. She called on holidays. "Pharmacy's got your new prescription ready," Tess said, "and they want the physical therapy deposit in cash. $400, all told." "My card's been acting up," I said. "Declined at the hardware store twice this week. Probably the chip. I'll run to the bank and pull cash. Save you the trip." "No," I said, more sharply than I meant. "A man likes to handle his own money. I'll go. I need the air." She studied me a second, then let it go. "Okay, Dad. Don't forget your scarf." I grabbed my checkbook off the counter and shrugged into my coat. I had no idea. The bank was quiet on a Tuesday morning. Just me, a young mother with a stroller, and Ruth Abernathy behind the counter. I'd banked with Ruth for 15 years. She knew my late wife by name. "Morning, Ted," she said. "What can I do for you?" "Need 400 out of the account." I slid the checkbook across. The main one. Ruth started typing. Then she stopped. She typed again. Slower. Her smile faded into something I didn't recognize. "Ted," she said quietly. "Just give me 1 second. Card's been declining. That the same problem?" She didn't answer right away. She leaned closer to her screen, then glanced up at me. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Sir, you should sit down." I laughed, because it seemed like a foolish thing to say to a man standing at a bank counter. "Ruth, it's me. What's the matter?" "The balance," she said. "There's $12 in the account." The words wouldn't line up in my head. That's not possible. There should be over 200,000. "Ted, please, sit down." She came around the counter and pulled a chair over. I gripped the counter instead. "There's a mistake," I said. My own voice sounded far away. "Ruth, please, just tell me there's a mistake." But she didn't tell me there was a mistake. She printed something, 3 pages, still warm, and laid them in front of me. Rows and rows of transfers, large ones, thousands at a time, over 3 months, and next to each one, the same name, over and over, Diane Lowell Hayes, my daughter. Ruth watched my face. Then, very softly, she asked the question I would hear in my sleep for weeks. "Do you recognize these withdrawals, Ted?" Did I recognize them? Diane is my eldest, 56, sharp as a tack, sharp in the way that can cut you. She left Millbrook young and never looked back. Marketing executive, big house in the city, a husband named Roger who shakes your hand too hard. The kind of daughter you brag about at the diner and barely see. At family gatherings, Diane swept in late and left early. She'd take a photo with me, post it with some caption about cherishing Dad, then check her watch. Everyone ate it up. "Diane's done so well," my sister-in-law would say. And then lower, shame about Tess. never finding her footing. That was how this family saw my girls. Diane the success, Tess the one who stayed home and never amounted to much. It always burned me, that talk, because it was Tess who showed up. Tess who held my wife's hand at the end, while Diane couldn't get away from work. 2 years back, after the stroke, Diane sat me down at the kitchen table, said it made sense for her to go on my account. Just so I can handle things if you can't, Dad. The banking, the bills, the legal stuff. You don't want to burden Tess with all that. She's got enough on her plate. I'd felt grateful. God help me. Diane was the capable one, the one with a head for money. You let Tess fuss over your health, she'd said, patting my hand. Leave the finances to me. It gets complicated. Standing in that bank, one thing rose up in my memory. A few weeks back, my wife's old friend Walter Briggs, the family lawyer, had left me a message I never returned. Ted, give me a call. It's about your account. I'd thought it was nothing. I was starting to think I'd been a fool. I drove home with the printouts on the passenger seat. At every stoplight, I glanced at them, like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something kinder. They didn't. At my kitchen table, I did arithmetic. I never thought I'd have to do at 79. That account wasn't extra. It was everything. The cardiologist, the medications that cost more than my first car, the physical therapy, the little cushion that let me keep this house, the house I'd shared with my wife for 40 years. Without it, I knew where I'd end up, a state home. The nearest one with a bed was 90 minutes away, in a town I'd only driven through, shared rooms, a waiting list, the kind of place where they call you buddy because they haven't got time to learn your name. I thought about my wife and what she'd say if she saw what one of our girls had done. My hand shook as I called Diane, straight to voicemail. I called again, voicemail. I texted, slow, one finger at a time. Call me. It's about my account. It's urgent. Nothing. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Not Diane. My sister-in-law, Carol. Ted, sweetheart, heard you've been having some money trouble. Diane's just beside herself, worrying about you and Tess. Let us know if there's anything we can do. XO, I read it 3 times. Money trouble. Diane's worrying about me and Tess. I set the phone face down on the table and stared at the wall my wife had picked the paint for. The question wasn't only where my money had gone anymore. The question was what, exactly, my daughter had already told the rest of the family, and why she'd dragged Tess's name into it. That evening, after Tess had gone home, I went looking through my wife's old desk. She'd kept everything in there. Every receipt, every birthday card, warranties for machines we'd thrown out a decade ago. I sat in the lamplight and pulled open the bottom drawer. Tax forms, insurance, a photo of the 2 of us, young and grinning, on the farmhouse porch, and then, near the bottom, an envelope that didn't look old at all. Crisp, white, a clean serif return address, Briggs and Associates, attorneys at law. The postmark was recent, about 3 months back, addressed to me, unopened. Diane handled the mail when she visited, and somehow this one had ended up filed away instead of in my hands. Walter Briggs, the same name on that voicemail I never returned. My heart was pounding for no reason I could name. Why would Walter be writing to me now? And how had this letter ended up buried in a drawer instead of on my table? The phone rang. It was Tess. Dad, you sound funny. You okay? I almost told her everything right then, but something held my tongue. If Diane had truly done this, and if she'd been telling people Tess was the problem, I needed to understand it before I said a word. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said. Just tired. Found some of your mother's old letters. Got sentimental. Want me to come back over? No. Get some rest. You do enough. I hung up and sat there a long time, the unopened envelope in my swollen hands, my thumb resting on the seal. I didn't open it that night. I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't ready to learn what kind of trouble had been brewing under my own roof. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll open it tomorrow. By morning, the envelope was still on the desk, still sealed. I'd like to tell you I was being patient. The truth is, part of me was afraid. I made a decision over my coffee. I wasn't going to storm anywhere. I wasn't going to call the whole family and start hollering about thieves. If I did, Diane would just spin it. She'd make me out to be a confused old man who couldn't keep track of his own money. She'd already planted that seed. the worried daughter, the failing father. No, I was going to understand it first. Every dollar, every date, every signature. I spread the bank printouts on the table and read them properly, slow, with my reading glasses. I didn't understand half of it. Authorized transfer. Account holder. Words from a world I'd left to Diane, like a fool. But I knew two people who would understand it. Ruth at the bank and Walter Briggs. There was one more thing, and it shamed me to think it. Diane had spent weeks making this look like Tess, but Tess wasn't even on that account. Tess never asked me for a dime. Tess was the one who'd told me more than once, "Dad, you should keep an eye on the money side, just to be safe." I'd waved her off. "Diane's got it handled," I'd said. "I don't want a war with my own daughter," I said out loud to my empty kitchen. "I just want the truth." I meant it too. I thought the worst part was losing the money. Sitting there with my cold coffee and a stack of paper that didn't add up, I had no way of knowing. I was wrong. The worst part hadn't even started. Ruth met me at the bank during her break. She took me to a little side room with a round table and spread the statements out between us. Tess drove me there and waited in the lobby. I wasn't ready to show her yet. "I'm not supposed to give advice," Ruth said, "but I can explain what's on the page. Please." She pointed to a line at the top I'd glossed right over. Joint owner, Diane Lowell Hayes. "When Diane went on this account 2 years ago," Ruth said, "she didn't go on as a helper. She went on as a joint owner, full owner. Same as you." I frowned. "But it's my money, my pension, the farmhouse sale. Doesn't matter, legally." Ruth's voice was careful. "Once she's a joint owner, the law says half that money is hers. She can withdraw any amount, any time. She doesn't need your permission." The room felt smaller. "So, when she took it, on paper," she hesitated. "On paper, she didn't steal anything. She withdrew from an account she legally co-owned." I sat with that. A man saves his whole life, and his own child empties it, and the law just shrugs. "She didn't steal a thing," I said slowly. On paper," Ruth agreed. I looked at the rows of transfers, the dates, the careful climbing amounts. 2,000, then 5, then 15. She hadn't grabbed it all at once. She'd bled it out, slow, the way you'd hope an old man wouldn't notice. "She went on my account to handle the paperwork," I said. "That's what she told me." Ruth said nothing. She just looked at me, and I understood. The paperwork was never the point. But paper, I was learning, doesn't always tell the whole story. And I was about to find out just how much my wife had kept off the page. I felt the change before I understood it. It was at the diner on Main Street, where I've had breakfast most mornings for 30 years. Hal Foster, an old friend, caught my eye from his booth, then suddenly got very interested in his eggs. The waitress, a girl I've known since she was in pigtails, set down my coffee without a word. In a town the size of Millbrook, you can feel a story moving through it, like a draft under a door. It was Carol who finally said it out loud. She called that afternoon, all sugar and concern. "Ted, I have to ask. Diane told us about your account, about the money being gone." My stomach turned. "What did Diane tell you?" "That it's mostly gone, and that..." A pause. The kind people take when they're enjoying themselves. "That Tess has been taking it. From you." She said Diane found out and is just heartbroken. That she didn't want to say anything, but the family deserved the truth. For a moment I couldn't breathe. She hadn't just taken my money. She'd built a story around it and handed the role of the thief to her own sister, to Tess, the one who'd never taken a penny, the one who showed up every single day. "Aki Carol," I said, and I was proud of how steady I sounded. "Tess hasn't touched my money. Tess isn't even on the account. Diane is." A silence. Then, gently, like she was humoring a confused old man. "Oh, Ted, of course you defend Tess. You always have." That was the moment I understood. The truth, on its own, wasn't going to be enough. I was going to have to prove it, and I was going to have to clear my Tess's name in front of every soul in this town. Diane finally called me back that night. 3 days of silence, then her name on my screen at 9 o'clock. "Dad?" Her voice was warm, smooth. The voice she used on clients. "I hear you've been working yourself up." Working myself up. I kept my own voice level. "Diane, the account is empty. My account. I know. It's a mess. The bank's been a nightmare. A long sigh performed for my benefit. Listen, Dad, you don't need to be digging into all this. It's complicated. It's not good for your heart. I'm not digging. I'm reading the statements. A pause, the warmth cooled a few degrees. The statements, she repeated. Your name is on every transfer, Diane. Every single one. I'm a joint owner. Now there was steel under the syrup. I have every right to manage that money. You don't understand how any of this works, Dad. You never did. Mom always handled it. Then help me understand. Where did $200,000 go? She didn't answer that. Instead, her voice dropped, low and almost kind, which was worse than shouting. You want to be careful here, she said. You start making accusations, at your age, with your memory. People are going to wonder if you're still all there. Tess included. You don't want them thinking you can't manage. You know what comes next. There it was. Not a daughter. A threat wearing my daughter's voice. And the thing she was threatening me with was the home. The 90-minute drive. The shared room. I'm not making anything up, Diane, I said. I'm just reading the statements. Get some sleep, Dad. We'll talk when you're thinking clearly. The line went dead. I stood in the dark kitchen, the phone still warm in my hand, and felt something settle, cold and certain. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The only way out now was forward. Briggs & Associates turned out to be 2 rooms above the hardware store, with a coffee maker older than my truck. Walter Briggs was a thin man near my own age, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, a handshake gentler than I expected. Ted Lowell, he said, settling behind his desk. I've been trying to reach you for months. I know, I'm sorry. I didn't get your letter until this week. I told him why. The drawer, the mail Diane handled, the empty account. He listened without interrupting, fingers laced together. When I finished, he was quiet a moment. I can't tell you everything your late wife and I discussed, he said. Privilege survives her. You understand? My wife? That stopped me cold. What's Margaret got to do with any of this? He took off the glasses, folded them. Before she passed, your wife came to see me. More than once. She was worried, Ted. About Diane. About how Diane handled money. And about putting her on that account. My chest went tight. Margaret never said a word to me. She didn't want to turn you against your own daughter on a feeling, he said gently. So she did some quiet things instead, to protect you, while she still could. Margaret, 40 years of marriage, and she'd been guarding my back even at the end. Protect me how? He smiled, but didn't answer. That part I can't say yet. It isn't mine to tell. Then whose is it? Hers. He stood, signaling the end. Your wife left instructions for when this day came. And it's come. Give me a few days to put it together. I left with more questions than answers, but for the first time in a week, I felt something other than dread. My Margaret had seen this coming. From the grave, she was still looking after me. Knowing Margaret had left a plan and being able to use it were 2 different things. I went back to the bank and asked them to freeze the account. The manager was polite and immovable. It's a joint account, Mr. Lowell. Either owner can access it. You can't lock your daughter out without a court order. A court order. The word sat in my mouth like a stone. I tried the family next. I called my nephew Raymond, a level-headed man, and asked him to just sit and look at the statements with me. He hemmed and hawed. Uncle Ted, I don't want to get in the middle. Diane says you've been confused lately, that this whole thing's upsetting you, and Tess is making it worse. Raymond, I have the papers right here. Her name's on every line. I'm sure there's an explanation, he said. There always is. And just like that, another door closed. Meanwhile, the bills didn't stop. The cardiologist's office called about a balance. The pharmacy needed the new prescription paid. I covered what I could from the little I had in checking, watching my own numbers shrink, doing the grim math of how long an old man can hold out. 2 months, maybe 3. Worst of all, I could see it landing on Tess. People were cool to her at the bakery. She came by one evening with red eyes and asked me, quiet, Dad, did Diane tell people I took your money? I couldn't lie to her. When I told her the truth, she didn't get angry. She just took my hand and said, then we clear it up together. That steadied me more than anything. I wasn't fighting alone, but I still had no proof, and the family had already made up its mind. I need to pause here a moment. If you've ever been an older parent who handed something over to a child you trusted and felt the ground shift under you, then you know the kind of cold I felt in that bank parking lot. If this story is reaching something in you, go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss how it ends. And tell me in the comments, did you ever have to stand up to your own family? Now let me tell you about the phone call that changed everything. The phone call came from Roger, Diane's husband. In 30 years, Roger had never once called me on his own. He was all firm handshakes and golf stories, the kind of man who corrects your grammar at Thanksgiving. So when his name lit up my screen, I almost didn't answer. Ted. His voice was tight. I need you to stop this. Whatever you're doing, you're putting Diane through hell. I'm putting her through hell. I almost laughed. Roger, she emptied her own father's account. She's under enormous pressure. You have no idea what this year's been. What kind of pressure? He caught himself, but a beat too late. The business, my investments. We've had setbacks, the kind that follow a man home and sit at his dinner table. What setbacks, Roger? A long silence. When he spoke again, his voice had cracked at the edges. We're behind on the house. Months. The bank sent the real letter. A shaky breath. Diane couldn't stand the thought of anyone finding out. The country club, her colleagues. So she said it was temporary. A loan. She'd put it all back before you ever noticed. He stopped himself. But it was too late. The picture snapped into focus. Diane wasn't a greedy woman helping herself for sport. She was drowning. The big house, the title, the captions about cherishing Dad, all of it was a woman holding her breath underwater, and my account was the last air in the room. It didn't make it right. Nothing made it right. She'd robbed her father and blamed her sister, but it made her human, and somehow that was worse. Roger, I said gently, why are you really calling me? He didn't answer. He just hung up, and I sat there knowing my daughter wasn't a villain in a story. She was a desperate woman, which made her so much more dangerous. 2 days later, the invitations went out. Diane was throwing me a party, my 80th birthday at the Birchwood, the nicest restaurant in town, the place folks book for weddings and anniversaries. She'd invited everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, old friends from church, half of Main Street. I found out the way I found out everything now, secondhand. Carol mentioned it on the phone, assuming I already knew. Isn't it lovely, she said. Diane's sparing no expense for her daddy. Such a devoted girl. A devoted girl. Throwing a lavish party with money she couldn't account for, in front of every person whose opinion mattered in this town. I understood exactly what it was. A stage. A chance for Diane to stand up before everyone. The generous daughter, the reliable one, and cement the story she'd been selling. And Tess, if she was mentioned at all. The sad sister who couldn't be trusted around her father's money. That night, Diane called, smooth as ever. Dad. About the party? A pause. I think it'd be best if Tess didn't come. She's been so worked up. I don't want a scene on your big day. It's my birthday, I said. Tess will be at my side. Dad, please. People are already worried about your judgment. Don't make it harder. For my judgment. She'd weaponized my own age against me. After she hung up, I sat a long while at Margaret's desk. Then I called Walter Briggs and told him about the party. About the Birchwood. About all of it. He was quiet a moment. Ted, he said, I'll have everything ready by then. And if you'll allow it, I'd like to be there myself. At the party? In the room, he said, when the time comes. I didn't know yet what Margaret had left me, but I was about to find out. In front of everyone. The next morning, Tess drove me to Walter's office. I'd told her everything by then. The account, the joint ownership, Diane, the lies. She'd cried once, in the truck, and then she'd squared her shoulders and said, Okay, Dad, what do we do? Walter met us at the door himself. He brought us coffee. Then he opened a thick leather folder on his desk and laid his hands flat on it, almost reverent. Your wife was a careful woman, Ted, he said. Smarter than the two of us put together. I know it, I said. Don't I know it? About 6 months before she passed, Margaret came to me. She'd watched Diane handle money for years, and it worried her. She said, and I'm quoting her, Walter, I won't be around to watch the hen house. Lock the door for me. I had to look away. I could hear her saying it. That was Margaret to the bone. So we did some things, Walter said. Quietly. They've been sitting in a drawer, waiting, in case they were ever needed. He looked at me steady. They're needed now. What things? He shook his head, gentle. On the day, in front of everyone. Margaret wanted it that way. Out in the open, where no one could whisper it away after. He glanced at Tess. She was very clear that Tess should be standing right beside you when it happened. Tess reached over and took my hand. I'm not going to that party to fight my own daughter, I said. My voice came out rough. I'm going to clear Tess's name, and to stop being treated like a confused old fool who can't mind his own house. Walter nodded. Then bring your daughter, the good one. He almost smiled. And let your wife do the rest. I didn't know yet what Margaret had prepared, but I was about to find out, in front of everyone. The birchwood glowed that evening. White tablecloths, soft jazz, a banner that read, Happy 80th, Ted, in gold letters. Diane had spared nothing. Around 30 people filled the private room. Every aunt, every cousin, faces from church and Main Street, all dressed up and smiling. I came in with Tess on my arm. The conversation didn't stop exactly, but it stumbled. I heard it ripple across the room, the soft hiss of whispers behind cupped hands. Heads turned toward Tess. Eyes slid away from her. Diane saw us from across the room and crossed the floor fast, her smile bright and her eyes hard. Dad, she kissed my cheek. You look wonderful. Then, low, just for me. I asked you to leave Tess at home. She's my daughter, I said quietly. Both of you are. I brought her. Diane straightened, scanning the room, recalculating. Then the smile returned, wide and public. Everyone made it, she announced. Wonderful. Family is everything, isn't it? People raised their glasses. The jazz played on. Diane moved through the crowd like a woman on a campaign, shaking hands, laughing, refilling drinks. The devoted daughter hosting the perfect night. Tess settled me at the head table and sat beside me, close. Carol gave her a thin, pitying smile from across the room. Hal Foster wouldn't look at either of us. In the back corner, almost hidden, an old thin man in a gray suit sat alone with a leather folder on his lap. Walter. He caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. Steady, Dad, Tess murmured. Wait for it. I watched Diane tap a fork against her glass and call for everyone's attention, stepping to the front of the room with a champagne flute raised high. The room went quiet, and I felt the whole night tilt toward whatever was coming. Thank you all for coming, Diane began. 80 years, can you believe it? My father has given this family everything. Warm murmurs. Someone said, Here, here. And family, Diane went on, her voice swelling, means responsibility. It means caring for our parents when they can't care for themselves, especially their finances, when their judgment isn't what it used to be. She let that hang. Her eyes touched me for a second, soft and sad, the loving daughter worried about her failing dad. It hasn't been easy lately, she said, lowering her voice into something grave. Some of you know there've been concerns about Dad's accounts, about someone close to him who hasn't acted in his best interest. A pause, heavy and deliberate. I've tried to handle it quietly, to protect this family, but I think it's time we were honest about who's been taking advantage of him. The whisper started, and this time, nearly every head in the room turned, slow and certain, toward Tess. I felt my Tess go rigid beside me. Her hand found mine under the table and gripped it. 30 faces, 30 people who'd known my girls their whole lives, looking at my good daughter like she was something scraped off a shoe. I stood up. It took me a moment. My knees aren't what they were. And Tess rose to steady me. The room froze. Diane's smile flickered just for an instant before she caught it. Dad, she said smoothly. Sit down. This isn't the time. You're right about one thing, Diane. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Someone close to me took my money, and I think it's time this whole family knew exactly who, in black and white. I nodded toward the back of the room. Walter Briggs stood and walked forward with the leather folder in his hands. Diane's eyes locked on it, and the color drained from her face. Walter set a stack of pages on the white tablecloth in the center of the room, where everyone could see. "My name is Walter Briggs," he said. "I've been this family's attorney for 40 years. With Ted's permission, I'm going to read from his bank statements. You can pass them around after." "This is absurd," Diane said. "Dad's confused. Nobody needs to—" "January 12th, Walter read, calm as Sunday. "Transfer out, $15,000. Recipient, Diane Lowell Hayes." The room went very still. "January 26th, 22,000. Diane Lowell Hayes." He turned a page. "February 9th, 18,000. February 23rd, 30,000. Each one, the same name. Every name landed like a stone dropped in still water. I watched it move across their faces. Confusion, then doubt, then something colder. Carol's hand had risen to her mouth. Hal Foster was staring at Diane now, not at Tess. "It's a joint account," Diane said loudly. Her voice had climbed. "I'm a co-owner. This is legal. I had every right. No one said it was illegal, Diane." I kept my voice quiet, even, the way Margaret used to when she meant business. "I'm saying it happened. These aren't accusations. These are dates and dollar amounts. Read them yourselves." Walter slid the folder down the table. A cousin opened it. Then another leaned in. I watched the pages travel hand to hand, and I watched the story Diane had spent weeks building come apart, line by line. "You told them it was Tess," I said. "You told this whole town your sister was robbing me, while your name sat on every single withdrawal. That's not—" Diane looked around the room and found no friendly faces. "You don't understand the situation, Dad." "Then explain it," said my nephew Raymond, grim, holding a page. "Explain this, Diane." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. And into that silence, Walter said, "There's more. Quite a bit more." Walter opened the leather folder and drew out a second set of documents. These ones older, the paper softened with handling. "Some of you knew Margaret Lowell," he said. The room quieted at her name. 6 months before she passed, she came to my office. She was sharp as a blade that day, and she was worried about this exact situation. So she instructed me to do 2 things, and to keep them sealed until they were needed. Diane had gone gray. "Mom, what did Mom do?" "First," Walter said, "on Margaret's instruction, we drew up a revocation. 45 days before her death, Diane's status as joint owner of that account was legally revoked. She was removed. The bank was notified." A gasp somewhere in the room. "Which means," Walter went on, even as a judge, "every withdrawal you just heard me read, all of them dated this year, long after the revocation, was made by someone with no legal right to that account. That is not a family disagreement. That is unauthorized. The courts can address it." Diane's mouth worked silently. She stared at the dates, at the trap she'd walked into without ever seeing the floor. "Second," Walter said, "Margaret placed the proceeds of the farmhouse and a reserve for the Ted's care into a protected trust, out of reach of either daughter's signature." He paused. "And she named the trustee, the person she chose to guard her husband's care should the day ever come." He turned and looked at Tess. She named Tess. 30 heads swung toward my younger girl. Tess froze beside me. She hadn't known. I saw it on her face, the pure shock of it. She turned to me and I could only shake my head. I hadn't known either. Then Tess looked across the room at her sister, and when she spoke, her voice was soft and steady. "Mom knew, Diane," she said. "She knew all along." For a moment, Diane just stood there, the champagne flute still in her hand. Then her composure cracked all at once, like ice on a pond in spring. "You don't understand," she said, and her voice had lost all its polish. "I was going to put it back. Every dollar. I just needed time. The market turned on us. The house, Roger's debts. We were drowning. You let them think it was your sister," said Carol. She lowered her hand, and her face was hard now. "You called me. You sat in my kitchen and told me Tess was robbing her own father. I panicked." Diane turned to the room, pleading. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything and keep smiling at the club every Saturday." "So you took it from him." Raymond nodded at me. "From your 80-year-old father, Who needs that money to live? Diane spun toward me. Dad, you can fix this. Tell them. You always loved Tess more. Mom set this whole thing up to make me look. Stop. My voice came out louder than it had in years. The room went still. Your mother set nothing up. She protected me. From you. And she was right to. At the back, Roger had come in late and stood frozen by the door, his face the color of ash. He didn't say a word in her defense. He just looked at the floor. I could have let my daughter drown right there. Part of me wanted to. God forgive me. But Margaret's voice was in my head, and that wasn't the man she'd married. You're still my daughter, Diane, I said. I won't send you to prison if there's another road, but you'll pay back every cent, through Walter, on paper, and you will never touch my money or your sister's name again. The party was over. Everyone knew it. The jazz still played its cheerful tune through the wall. Absurd now, like music at the wrong funeral. Diane set down her glass. Her hand was trembling. She looked around the room one last time, searching for an ally, and found none. Then she walked out, Roger a few steps behind her, and the door of the birchwood swung shut. No one spoke. Then I did something I'd been needing to do for years. I gripped the edge of the table, steadied myself on Tess's shoulder, and I stood tall as my old back would let me, so the whole room had to look at me. I want to say something about my daughter Tess, I said. The room held its breath. For 6 years, this girl has driven me to every appointment. She's cut my pills, fixed my roof, sat with me so I wouldn't be alone in that house at night. My voice wavered, then held. She did it while the rest of you called her the one who never amounted to anything. I looked around, slow and deliberate. She amounted to everything. You all just weren't looking. Tess was crying. So was I. I won't pretend otherwise. Carol was crying too. Raymond came over and put a heavy hand on Tess's shoulder. We owe you an apology, Tess, he said gruffly. Every one of us. One by one, the faces that had turned away from her at the diner turned back, not with pity this time, with something closer to shame and respect. I sat back down, worn out and lighter than I'd felt in months, and took Tess's hand. Your mother knew what she had in you, I told her. And now, so do they. Walter moved fast in the days after the party. He filed an emergency motion, and a judge froze what remained of any account Diane could still reach within the week. The protected trust was already locked tight. That was Margaret's doing, and it held. Whatever Diane still had, the law now had its hand on her shoulder. We sat in Walter's office, Tess and I, while he laid out the options on his old wooden desk. You could press criminal charges, Ted, he said. The withdrawals after the revocation were unauthorized. A prosecutor would have a real case. I sat with that a long moment. Then I shook my head. She's still my child, I said. Margaret would never forgive me if I put our daughter in a cell. I want the money back. I want her out of my accounts. That's all. So Walter built a different road. A structured repayment agreement, signed and binding, in exchange for not pursuing charges. Diane, facing prison, signed every page. It wasn't all there. A good deal of it was simply gone, swallowed by debt and bad investments. But between the trust Margaret had protected and the assets Diane was forced to liquidate, the numbers came out where they needed to. She sold the second car, the jewelry, a vacation condo they'd been underwater on for a year. In the end, she repaid around $120,000 on a schedule Walter would enforce. Combined with the trust my wife had locked away before she died, it was enough. Enough for the medications. Enough for the cardiologist, enough for the physical therapy, and the aide who comes twice a week now, and for me to stay exactly where I belong, in my own bed, in the house Margaret and I built. That 90-minute drive to the state home never happened. Diane and Roger lost the house anyway. The repayment took whatever the bank hadn't already claimed. In a town the size of Millbrook, news travels faster than any billboard. The story of the Birchwood was everywhere within a week. The colleagues she'd been so afraid of finding out, they found out. The country club she'd robbed her own father to keep up appearances at quietly let her membership lapse. I won't pretend I didn't grieve it. She's still my daughter. I taught her to ride a bike in that farmhouse driveway. I walked her down the aisle. About a month after the party, a letter came. Her handwriting, shaky on the envelope. Inside, a single page. She didn't ask for anything. She just said she was sorry and that she understood if I never wanted to see her again. I read it twice. Then I set it in Margaret's desk drawer, in with the old receipts and the photo from the porch. I haven't answered it yet. Some wounds a man has to sit with before he knows what to say. But I keep it. That counts for something. Then, one gray afternoon, there was a knock at the door, and Roger stood on my porch. No firm handshake, no golf story, just a tired man holding his hat in both hands. "I left her, Ted," he said before I could speak. "After it all came out. I should have stopped her a long time ago, and I didn't." He swallowed. "I came to say I'm sorry. To you. And to Tess. I knew. And I helped her hide it." I looked at him a long moment. Then I stepped back and held the door open. "Coffee's on," I said. "Tess is in the kitchen. You can say it to her yourself." The hardest part wasn't Diane. It was everyone else. The same relatives who'd looked through Tess at the diner now couldn't do enough for her. Carol started calling every few days. Cousins who hadn't spoken to either of us in years sent cards. Hal Foster stopped me outside church and gripped my hand and said how sorry he was, how he should have known better. I'll be honest. There was a part of me, the proud, stubborn part, that wanted to be cold to them. They'd believed Diane over my Tess in a heartbeat. They'd tried my good girl and convicted her on a phone call. But cold doesn't warm an old man's house. And it wasn't who Margaret raised me to be. So when Carol came by with a pie and a long, teary apology, I let her say it. I made her coffee. And then, gently, I told her the truth. "I'm glad you see it different now, Carol," I said. "I am. But I wish you'd asked me first. Or asked Tess. Before you decided she was a thief." She started to defend herself, then stopped. "You're right, Ted. I'm ashamed." "I know you are. And I meant it. We're all right. But this family's done treating Tess like the one to blame. She earned better. From all of us. That was the line I drew. With every one of them. Not anger. Just offense. Set politely but firmly in the ground. Some understood. Raymond became a real friend. Comes by Saturdays to sit with me and watch the ball game. Others drifted off, uncomfortable around an old man who'd stopped needing their good opinion. I find I can live with that just fine. And Tess? Tess held her head a little higher in that town now. It was a long time coming. One evening, weeks later, Tess and I sat on the back porch. It was that soft hour when the light goes gold and everything feels forgiven. She had a quilt over my knees and a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. "Dad," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Did you ever suspect Diane? Before the bank, I mean. Did Mom ever say anything to you?" I was quiet a while, watching the yard go dim. "No," I admitted. "Your mother carried it alone. I've wondered why she never told me." I turned to her. "I think I finally understand it. She didn't want to make me choose, to look at one daughter and wonder, so she handled it the quiet way, locked the hen house, and never made me watch the fox. She made me the trustee," Tess said softly. "Before she passed, before any of this. She never told me either." Of course she did. I said it like the most obvious thing in the world. "Who else would she trust with my life, Tess? Not Diane. Diane was the loud one. You were the one who showed up. Every single day." My voice caught. "Your mother knew exactly which of you was which. She always did. I'm just sorry it took me 80 years and an empty bank account to say it out loud." Tess didn't say anything. She just leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she had when she was small. We sat there a long time, the two of us, while the light went out of the sky. All those years, the family called her the failure, and the two people whose opinion ever mattered, her mother and me, had never been fooled for a second. I just wish I'd told her sooner. The trust did one thing I hadn't expected. Walter insisted on a small, fair allowance for Tess, pay for the work of caring for me. "Caregivers get paid, Ted," he said. "There's no shame in it. Margaret wanted it that way. She wrote it right in." For the first time in 6 years, Tess had a little breathing room, and she did something she hadn't let herself dream about in a long time. There's an empty storefront on Main Street, 2 doors down from the diner. Used to be a bakery decades back. Tess had walked past it her whole life. She leased it that summer. Nothing fancy. A few tables, a glass case, The cinnamon rolls folks in town already drove out of their way for, but it was hers. The first thing in her whole life that was just hers. I go every morning. She sets me up at the corner table by the window with my coffee, black, the way Margaret never could talk me out of, and I watch Main Street wake up while she pulls trays from the oven. The hardware store rolls up its shutter. Raymond comes in Saturdays for 2 glazed. Some mornings my chest aches, and I take my pills with the coffee and think about how close I came to a shared room 90 minutes from this window. Then I look at my daughter, flour on her apron, humming her mother's old songs, and I let it go. Even Roger comes in sometimes, on his way to his new job a town over. Even Carol, who always leaves too big a tip, like she's still apologizing. Sometimes I wonder if Diane will ever walk through that door. I haven't decided what I'll do if she does. For now, the door's ours to open. Or not. Diane moved away that fall. She took a job 2 states over. Somewhere nobody knew the story of the Birchwood. She keeps up the repayment, mostly. Walter chases her when she doesn't. And that's enough. The money comes in, slow and steady, into the trust. She sends a card now and then. My birthday, Christmas, short notes in that shaky hand. I read them. I keep them in Margaret's drawer with the rest. We don't talk much. The wound's still there, just quieter now. The way old wounds get when you're my age and you've collected a few. Roger and I found an unlikely peace. We're not close, but he stops by when he's in town, and we talk like 2 men who weathered the same storm from different boats. He got his footing. He seems lighter for being out from under it all. There was a young woman, Becca, Carol's granddaughter, who texted Tess in the worst of it, when she felt the whole family had turned on her, said she didn't believe a word of Diane's story. She turned out to be the real thing. She works weekends at the bakery now when she's home from school, and she's become like family to both of us. The kind you'd choose if a person got to choose. The relatives who came back mostly came back for good. The ones who couldn't handle the new version of us, an old man and his daughter who'd stopped needing their approval, kept their distance. I stopped losing sleep over that a while ago. It's a smaller circle now, but it's a true one. Every soul left in it is somebody who'd have believed my tests in the dark, without a stack of papers to prove it. That I've learned is worth more than a room full of people raising their glasses. People ask me sometimes, the ones who know the story, if I ever wanted revenge. If watching my daughter fall apart in that room felt good. The honest answer is no, not the way they mean. I could have ruined her. Walter said the criminal case was solid. I could have sent her to prison, taken everything, made sure the whole world knew exactly what she'd done. There were nights, early on, when an angry old man wanted just that. But I figured something out. Somewhere along the way, if I'd done it for spite, if I'd lied or schemed or torn her down just to feel the satisfaction, then I'd have become a little bit like her, and I'd have lost the one thing this mess never managed to take from me, the man Margaret married. I didn't win because I was louder or crueler or more clever. An old man is none of those things anymore. I won because the truth was on my side, and because my wife was smarter than all of us, and because I had a daughter who never stopped showing up. Here's what I'd tell another father, if he were sitting across from me at the bakery. Don't wait. Don't wait to tell your good child you see them. I spent years letting this family call my test the failure, and I let it stand, because speaking up felt like stirring the pot. That silence cost her more than money ever could. And love, real love, isn't letting your family walk all over you and calling it loyalty. You can love your child and still refuse to let her rob you. You can forgive a person and still lock the door behind them. It took me 80 years to learn that. I hope it doesn't take you as long. This morning, the light came through the bakery window the same way it came through my kitchen that Tuesday in March. Gold and slow and ordinary. The kind of light a man doesn't notice until everything's changed. Tess pulled the first tray of cinnamon rolls from the oven. The whole shop filled with the smell of it, the same smell that used to come from Margaret's kitchen on Sunday mornings. I was in my corner by the window, quilt over my knees, both hands wrapped around my coffee. Tess set a warm roll on a plate and carried it over to me. "Here you go, Dad," she said. I looked up at my daughter, 52 years old, flour on her apron, her mother's smile. "Thank you, Tess." I made sure to say her name. I say it a lot now. I spent too many years letting other people say it like an apology. She sat down across from me. Outside, Main Street was waking up. Raymond would be in around 9 for his 2 glazed. You did good, I told her. All of it. Your mother would be proud. I'm proud. She had to look out the window for a second. Then she squeezed my hand. A long time ago, a bank teller looked up at me and told me to sit down. Like the floor was about to fall out from under my life. And it was. Everything I thought I knew about my family came apart in that little room. I'm glad I sat down. I truly am. Because when I finally stood back up, past the lies, past the whispers, past my own foolish pride, I knew, for the first time in 80 years, exactly which of my children had been my home all along. And I'll never let her forget that I know it. If you made it this far, thank you for sitting with an old man's story. Here's what I'll leave you with. The child who does the quiet work is rarely the one who gets the applause, but she's always the one who matters most. If there's a son or daughter like that in your life, don't wait like I did. Tell them today, and tell me about them in the comments. I read everyone. If this story touched you, give it a like and subscribe. I've got more stories like it, linked down in the description. I'll see you in the next one.